Hello, welcome to Halcyon Blink. My name is Lon Rising, I'm your host for this episode. And let's talk about a Tarantino film. Specifically, let's talk about a Tarantino film that I still struggle with. I'm still not 100% convinced that it is actually a good Tarantino film. Hateful Eight. Premise of which, there is a bounty hunter who has caught a rather dangerous lady who is transporting her to be hanged and to collect a bounty, and through the course of doing so encounters a storm. This storm then prohibits his progress to be able to get to the town that he's after, and along the way he picks up a stranger, a mysterious hooded / hatted figure by the name of Samuel L. Jackson.
Got room for one more?
And the film effectively progresses from there. This is a old school whodunit style of drama. Even if it is set in the West, it doesn't really feel like a Western. You could take the story and you could take the premise, you could take the characters to a certain degree and transplant them into a different time, and it would likely still work. But given that Tarantino has an affinity to paying homage to other genres of films, this is his Western style film that isn't called Django Unchained. What is good about this film? The characters are strong. I can't argue against that. There are characters that have characteristics and traits to them that are overwhelming to a certain degree.
It's Oswaldo Mowbray.
Oswaldo?
Yes.
Samuel L. Jackson's character as the bounty hunter is probably the one with the most depth and complexity, because initially at least you could feel that he's maybe the sympathetic figure of this piece. But as the story progresses, he does some pretty reprehensible shit. Kurt Russell's character, you could argue, is maybe the hero of the piece, but he is a brute.
I give you, he got guts. But in the brains department, you're like a man who took a high dive in a low well.
He is rude, he is obnoxious, he is tremendously violent and unfeeling and unrelenting.
Horse shit.
Pay no attention to him.
Horse shit!
And then you have the other members of the piece, and they are innocent bystanders, albeit it soon becomes clear that maybe one of them is plotting something and something is afoot in terms of freeing this lady. There's also one surprising cameo in the piece that feels odd, feels forced, and feels unnecessary. The general character, again, feels somewhat one-dimensional, but I understand the need for him to be there because this film is yet another foray into Tarantino's experimentation with racism and its roots in American culture.
Well, cut my legs off and call me Shorty. Is that General Sanford Smithers I see?
Do you know that nigga, sir?
I don't know that nigger. But I know he's a nigger.
What I didn't like about the film was a couple of moments that they feel too convenient or they just come out of left field. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but in order to provoke the general into shooting, or at least attempting to shoot Samuel L. Jackson's character, who is a black man, and the general is a member of the Confederate Army, or rather a general in the Confederate Army, so holds no love for African Americans, is attempting to provoke him into shooting him, and in doing so recounts a story of encountering the general's long-lost son, who he's been searching for all this time and believes to be dead, but is still searching nevertheless. He professes that he has met his son. He knew who his son was. So he strips him naked, walks him through the winter blizzard until he drops to his knees begging for a blanket, and Samuel L. Jackson alleges that he then makes him suck his dick.
Oh my God!
We then see such fellation, and the general makes the move and Samuel L. Jackson shoots him. It's an odd scene. it's one that I really struggled to shake from my memory. The image of Samuel L. Jackson grabbing a handful of hair and ramming him into his dingus.
Oh, this is awkward.
Yeah, odd. Didn't like it. Just a very, very needlessly visual scene that we all understood the premise and we all understood the insinuation. I don't really understand why he needed to go that extra step, because it just seemed crass for the sake of being crass, especially when in all likelihood he made up the story to piss off the general. I get that maybe it was part of trying to realise the general's imagination and maybe that was what brought it to life, but it still didn't sit very well for me. Also, Samuel L. Jackson's character, when he's breaking down, he's doing his investigation and the whodunit, and he's rattling off all these observations that lead him to believe that one, if not all, of the members in the cabin that they find refuge in are in on the act. It's not like a typical detective who finds clues and deduces using that. He knows a lot of stuff that any reasonable individual would not know about this particular situation because he's been there before. That perhaps should have been made clear at the beginning of the piece so that we know that he's our point of reference for being able to find out who done it. He's the one we go along the ride with. Instead, it seems to all come in this one big lump where he goes, well, actually, I know that she wouldn't like that and he wouldn't have done this, and you put that there when he wouldn't, and I'll look over here and, oh, look, it's just as I suspected. It's just a bit too convenient, and it thinks it's being cleverer than it is, this film. There's also a couple of shock value moments that don't involve Samuel L. Jackson's penis, thankfully. And there's also a couple of half-hearted action scenes. There's not a lot of action in this film, and I think a lot of Tarantino fans will be disappointed by that. Albeit, when the action does kick off, it's very brief and incredibly bloody and incredibly violent. It's not an action-based film. It's a very much dialogue-driven experience, and one that has notable scenes and transferences throughout the film, chapters if you will.
What you think, Pete?
Well, I must admit, it does make the setup more convincing.
But overall, I remember not liking this film, and maybe that was what it was. That's maybe what its point was. It's called The Hateful Eight for a reason, because no one in this story is meant to be relatable or likable. No one. And to that end, it achieves its goal. But it kind of defies one of the great tenets of storytelling, which is that there has to be a heel and a babyface for any story to work and for anyone to walk away with a satisfying conclusion. And there wasn't really a babyface in this story. In fact, the person you could argue ends up being the babyface is a Confederate soldier who is a blatant racist who at the end, because he's dying and because Samuel L. Jackson's dying, asked to read a letter from Abraham Lincoln that he knows is fake, and that's his turn at the end of the film. That's him reconciling with Samuel L. Jackson as a black man and him as a white Confederate soldier, that they're somehow now okay. But he was still a racist throughout the whole film. So I don't know if that necessarily makes him a babyface. I don't know. So overall, this is one of the weaker Tarantino films, I feel. It wasn't as well shot, it's not quite as cinematic, doesn't have the same iconic moments. It uses a lot of the same overtures from Django, but just much less effectively, and I'd argue that the acting's a lot worse. There's not the Christoph Waltz, there's not the Leonardo DiCaprio, there's not the Jamie Foxx to carry this film through. It lacks that little bit of quality. So on a scale of 1 to 10, it gets a 5 for me. It's not one that I have the urge to watch over and over again like Pulp Fiction or Django or Inglourious Bastards. And Tarantino's fully capable of telling a nuanced story with plenty of layers and characters, but this film doesn't cut it for me. So what do you think? Do you think Hateful Eight was actually a good film, and maybe I'm misinterpreting some of the hateful aspects and some of the nuances that I might have missed, or the allusions to the Wild West culture or the spaghetti westerns of times gone past? Do you think it was a bad film like I do? And if so, why do you think so? Do you think Samuel L. Jackson's performance was good? Kurt Russell was good? Do you believe any of the other characters stole the show? Let me know in the comment section what you think. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, and as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Halcyon Blink.